been doing this where we just do I publish this whole thing. So like as we're talking and getting set up, you know,
Okay.
because people tend to like the authenticity
Yeah.
of it, you know.
For sure.
I do.
Yeah.
Too, personally.
That's real.
Yeah.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So this is Master of Zilch podcast. I'm your host, Trev Montalvan, and today we are joined by
Shakti.
And so we're going to talk about human design,
Mm-hmm.
and she is like it's not a competition, but she's pretty much, from talking to her initially, she seems like she knows about as much as anybody that I've met on human design, and I've met quite a few people on human design, and she seems very adept at sharing it in a practical, like actionable way. Because sometimes people get too caught up in the knowledge, and if you can't apply it to your life, then it's
Right.
just like learning a subject in the Rockefeller education system, basically.
Yep.
So, so without further ado, if you could share with us, what I like to say is, who are you? Who is Shakti? Share us a little bit about your journey. So, how did
Okay.
you get here?
Okay.
I had a 3-part question. It's who is Shakti? How did you get here? And where can they find you? That's what it is.
Oh, okay.
So like, where can they find you? Being, yeah, that mic's hooked up. Okay. Where are you from? Or how did you get here? Meaning
Okay.
like your journey, and then where can they find you? Meaning like, if they wanted to find you on social media or whatever, where can they find you?
Okay. Well, first of all, thank you for the space and the time and the invitation. I am a projector after all, so receiving an invitation is pretty critical and crucial
Yep.
to living my design. So for those who know about design, I am a 1/3 splenic projector. So who is Shakti? That's such a deep question, and what's really interesting, I've been deconstructing identity for the past month.
Really?
So it's like I don't even have an answer for that. You know, if I'm really honest. The human experience of who I am is I'm, a mom. I've got 2 small kids. I'm a human design expert who has been studying human design since 2016. I'm an emotional freedom technique practitioner, and I work with people dealing with really complex emotional patterns and traumatic memories and things of that nature. This is what I do now. I've also been a medical massage therapist working with trauma in the body for nearly a decade. I was a fitness coach for a long time, really focusing on balanced wellness. I'm a yoga instructor. I'm a minister. I have a very, very long career in my early age. So, yeah, and I also graduated from the University of Florida. I have a dual degree in classical history, which is interesting. I'm a classicist, and an English major. So I studied occult mystery religions with my classics degree. That was like my focus.
Was a degree? Like,
yes, that was a specialty, believe that or not.
Wow.
Yeah.
That is
yes.
crazy.
So I have a very long journey of being in this world of the metaphysics, really. I consider myself to be a metaphysical teacher over all things.
Yeah.
Because I'm fascinated by this other world that seems to be superimposed upon this one.
Right.
And I've always been since I was really, really young. I think partially because I did have like a near-death experience almost at birth right
You
away.
did?
Yeah. So I was born with a rare congenital heart defect. So 3 days after birth, I had open heart surgery, died, came back. It was a really tumultuous beginning to my life. Yeah. And I think that reset, I always joke about that story and say I tried to abort mission when I got here, and I was like, no, we're not doing Earth again.
Yeah.
And God was like, get back in there because you're doing Earth again.
For sure.
And so I see that moment as a reset point in my consciousness, and I imagine that when I came back, I was just slightly cracked open in just a different way. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, because that's what I was going to ask you. Is a lot of people on this spiritual journey, myself very, very much included, is it was a struggle to get to where I'm at now. It if I had gotten my shit together the way I'd have a long way to go. But if I was as put together in my early 20s as I am right now, I don't know. I wouldn't want to run for president, but I probably could.
You could.
Yeah. So that's what I was going to ask you is like, how did, like, it seems like you had less of that constant internal struggle and banging your head against the wall, and you just kind of were running with it. So you think was like you had a pretty good upbringing? Like, did you have like deal with depression? Did you?
Oh yeah, I had a lot of challenges. Always, I'm a first generation immigrant.
Okay.
So my family is Cuban, and they escaped communism. So they left Castro's regime. My brother was born in Cuba. I was the only one actually born here.
Wow.
So we came with nothing. We came out of need. We came and started from the ground up very much. My parents not knowing a language, working multiple jobs.
Yeah.
So I was brought up in a very, also to back that up, I have an extensive line of family members who are ex-political prisoners. So we're talking about severe trauma from that regime. My grandparents were imprisoned, both of them on my mom's side. My mom was orphaned. There was just a lot of things that happened that were really traumatic ancestrally.
Yeah.
So I come from that, and we come here, and thank God I was born here because the surgery I needed didn't exist. It was very new at the time that I was born, and the mortality rate was like 50%. So the fact that I'm alive is really like...
Yeah, I wonder if it's the same thing, because I had a cousin who died, like 2 weeks old, and it might have been the same condition.
It might have been. It's very rare.
He was born in like 87, I want to say.
So was I.
And they didn't have, where he was at least, they didn't have the surgery to bring him back, and he died. But they said, what I found out later is that, I should know what it is, but if he was born like now, he would have totally been saved.
There was only a handful of surgeons at the time who were doing this surgery, and I had to be airlifted to a whole other hospital. The guy flew in from California. Like, it was wild that I'm alive. Like, the fact that I'm alive is just wild.
A miracle.
And genuinely. Yeah. And so I think it's not that my life was devoid of those experiences, but God was always so close. It was like there was never an absence of God in my life. There was never an absence of goodness or
love,
presence, whether it was not necessarily in my physical space, but just around me.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That always felt so immediate to me.
When I think what you said earlier is it cracked you open, and it's like you were more like able to feel that instead of in this like deep inside this matrix, like not like in despair basically.
I was in the matrix, but I was also aware of not the matrix simultaneously.
Yeah, right.
So that
foot in both worlds.
Correct.
Kind of.
And it's funny that you say that, because that's how much I see myself very much as a bridge between worlds. I've always seen that, a world of the the metaphysical, and then the world of very practical. And as a teacher, I pride myself on that, on being someone who can bring both of these worlds together and make it applicable to, I live a very real matrix life. I'm a parent. I have small kids. I'm married. I have a job. I really do understand all of those struggles, physically, emotionally, all the things. But the beauty of being able to implement a life that is full of spirit, even within this reality, is so powerful.
Oh, yeah.
And I think it's so underestimated, for one, and for two, I think people think that yogis exist in a cave in the Himalayas and that's it, and there's no other form of that, and that's couldn't be further from the truth.
That's like the whole premise or the purpose of Maharishi Mahesh Yogi coming to America was to bring the householder into that yogi realm. And
Yogananda as well, which is actually the guru that brought me into my lineage. Yogananda was his whole
He paved
thing.
the way.
He did,
He came here
1920s.
And then I feel like Maharishi made it more mainstream.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. But Yogananda was actually who brought me really deep into the Kriya path, which is, my personal lineage.
Yeah.
And his life story and his work is so powerful.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it was so,
It's crazy.
cracked me open.
There's a picture in the beginning of his autobiography,
Right
the
in the
Yogi
cover.
book.
Right in the cover.
Well, yeah, but early in the book, there's a picture of him as a child.
Oh, yeah.
And I swear to God, I sent it to my brother. He's an Indian version of my brother, like spitting image.
That's amazing.
I swear to God, my youngest brother and him are like, they look like the same freaking person.
That'd be weird.
Would be weird. Because they say that, like, it doesn't happen necessarily linearly.
Yeah.
So he could have been Paramahansa and then came back.
Do you know what's interesting is 2 pages into that book, I was in tears.
Yeah.
And I couldn't stop crying. And it was his childhood. It wasn't even, he wasn't even there to like the epic part of the book where we're talking about peak experience.
Yeah.
And I cried almost the whole way through that book. And I had a very similar belief of like, what if that was my world? Like, there was some sort of past life recognition, which I've experienced in the past. I've had those moments. I've been to Egypt, and I've had moments in Egypt where I was like, whoa, like there was a whole understanding that befell me.
Yeah.
But reading that book was almost like that. It was like a remembering. It wasn't a reading. It was a remembering. And that was really deep.
Yeah.
That was like wildly profound. So yeah.
Well, I've been debating breaching this subject, but we had a ceremony last weekend, this past weekend, and it felt like a full confirmation. So I don't know if I should share it or not. I'm pretty sure I was JFK.
Oh wow.
Weird.
Man, you know what? I believe that. Just your whole energy.
Yeah, if I were to
your
tell
whole
you,
energy is
if I were to
like
tell-
that makes sense.
If I were to tell you all the stuff, like, and I haven't had visions because I'm not clairvoyant. I don't
Okay,
have visions,
okay.
but it's this like knowing.
Oh yeah, cognizance.
And then
Yeah.
like just like when it comes to politics, like things just click for me.
Oh,
It's
interesting.
weird. Yeah. And when I watched like Zeitgeist and like
Yeah.
9/11 Loose Change and stuff, 5-2 was about reconciling past life karma, and it felt like a call to action. Not like scary. It was like it's time. This is the lifetime to help end the.
Yeah.
Not in a mean way, just help them like transition to love.
Yeah.
You know, because they want you to fight them. But,
Of course I do.
yeah.
I have my own past life. Maybe we'll talk about that some more
Yeah.
time. That
Yeah, I don't
we'll
want to get too much
recognize.
into it.
Yeah.
We just
That's
touched
deep.
on it, so
yeah.
yeah.
That's we have more conversations to
Oh,
read
oh,
about,
yeah, definitely,
about
definitely.
this. Yeah.
So maybe tell us a little bit about like, because I like to go over like the challenges that you went through and what, because you mentioned about bridging the two worlds, and I'm sure that wasn't always easy.
No.
So maybe if you could go into a little bit, because a big part of this podcast is about self-development,
Yeah.
self-empowerment, and like giving people inspiration and like ideas of like how to navigate their life if they're going through similar things.
Well, I can tell you that, and this relates to design, because design really gave me this. This is something that design blessed me with, that saved my journey in a lot of ways. I struggled tremendously with trust and surrender for a lot of my life. I imagine it's a combination of my ancestral trauma, of just feeling like everything could fall apart at any moment, which is what happened to them. Coming in with your life almost being ending, and so you come in this hyper-vigilant state, and they're opening your chest up, taking out your heart. You know, imagine the implications of being born.
Yeah.
Your mother hasn't even held you, really, and now all of this is happening to you. And then I was on all these morphines and medications. They took me home, and I was vomiting for a straight month because I couldn't digest any food. So imagine coming into the world with that much trauma, and then having to handle that energetically, karmically. That was my karma, to come in with this thing and process that.
So how did you do that?
For me, it was just a matter of always feeling that loving, guiding presence in my life. And this might seem a little bit out there too. This is like my world has so many layers of dimensional understanding that it's, but there was always this like presence with me as a child. And he gave me the name Michael. I don't know I didn't know Michael at the time. This is the name that lived with me. And he spoke to me when I was a child, and I would be laying in bed at night, and I would be concerned about XYZ thing, and it was just a very soothing, masculine voice, very calming presence. And whenever I felt myself becoming afraid or wanting to run, this presence would always just show up. It was like a very consistent. And when I became a young adult, that disappeared. I didn't have access to that anymore, but it was really present when I was a child. Yes. So when I say that I've always felt like I was supported, I mean that. And so what I've understood now looking back, if I could offer something to anyone who's watching, is that going within is not only practical, it's critical.
Right.
There is, people imagine that having a relationship to God or spirit is impractical, that your spiritual practice is not practical, that your job is practical and all these things. And I would counter that by saying, how do you know what's even correct for you to do in the world if you have no true understanding of who you are?
Totally.
That is the most practical thing you can do.
Yeah, and I mean, when you think about the fact that, if you're atheist, you're atheist, but other than that, most people understand that there's some type of divine,
orchestration.
Because otherwise, like, the odds are
Yeah.
like 747 like being assembled from a junkyard with a tornado,
Yeah.
which is highly unlikely.
Yeah.
You know?
Very.
So yeah, it's like, if you understand that the Creator is everything, it created everything, and it is everything, then you are part of that creation. You know, like, I mean, I'm familiar with Christianity more, so like, the kingdom of heaven is within you.
Yeah.
Like Jesus said,
There's so
all
many
these
of
things that
those.
I have done, there will be those that come after me that can all do
Do
all
greater
this and
things.
more. Yeah. Like Paramahansa's book, The Second Coming of Christ.
Oh, I've read. Yeah, I'm
where
reading
he,
it right now.
he
again,
talks
I'm going
about
in it.
the fact that the second coming is people
Internal.
achieving, and people achieving
Absolutely.
like
Christ
levels
consciousness.
up along the lines of where Jesus went,
Absolutely.
and it, like, the more and more you have come online, like, it's just like a domino effect.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely.
So
So that's what I've done a lot of, to answer your question, is done
Yeah.
internal work, presence work, also a lot of somatic healing work. I was drawn to things like massage. I was drawn to things like emotional freedom technique. I was drawn to a lot of work to clear things that I knew were living in my body, living in my spirit, living in my astral body,
Yeah.
that I couldn't get a grip on with my mind. So that was also a cornerstone.
So it's my fifth line. I'm a 5'2". It's my fifth line coming out. I like to
Okay.
make things practical.
Mhm.
So maybe you could tell us a little bit, walk us through the emotional freedom technique.
Yeah, sure. Emotional freedom technique was really put together as we know it now by an individual called Gary Craig. And the idea being that this is borrowed from acupuncture. You know, we have meridians, energy centers in the body. In yoga, we understand that as well. We have plexuses and we have energy centers, and there's this whole communication that's happening in the system. So what EFT does is it moves energy, which is emotion, through the meridian system wherever it is restricted or blocked with acupressure, rhythmic acupressure. So it's a combination of, you're using language, so you're engaging the mind, you're saying certain things, and you're using certain pressure points in the body to basically short circuit the amygdala response. So you're stopping that limbic brain from having the same traumatic response that it usually would. So if I were to say to you, think of a memory of when you're a child, that still when you think about it, you get physical feeling. That's when you know that something is stuck. Your cheeks still get hot, your stomach still gets tight.
Yeah.
That's like, man, I haven't processed that. I think I have, but your body hasn't.
Sure.
This is where EFT becomes beautiful
Yeah.
tool for removing the emotional, the heaviness of that memory. So then the goal would be that you could think about that experience without having the emotional
Right.
response. And at that point, you know you've collapsed.
You're
That
free.
emotional presence, you're free. And so what that does, because people don't realize that when you're holding on to these kinds of experiences, it actually limits your creative energy. It makes you more tired, it makes you more shrouded. And when you start becoming free of these things, all of a sudden you get ideas, things start aligning for you, serendipity becomes far more real. People don't realize that they're paying, it's real estate in your energy field. When you're still financing a memory or an experience that's not even now, it was then, you're financing it, you're paying for it.
So this is a subject, and we don't have to go into it too much, but this is a subject that I feel like it's we just accept it, that's like normal, but it's really not. And so, like, when I look at like the dating world, and we're looking at like the rise in antidepressants and anti-anxiety, and the rise in divorce rate, and the lowering of the birth rate, and all these types of factors, they're coming from the fact that we have all this stacked up trauma, and I used to come from a personal place with this, but I'm really taking a step back and looking at it from a third person view more. Like, I think about like young people dating, right? Like in their late teens, early 20s, and they're, somewhat innocent, but somewhat they're carrying some baggage already. But then they're experimenting, and then you have a bad breakup, and then that's trauma, and then it becomes like the norm, and so it's like people don't feel worthy on both the side of young men, young women. They don't feel worthy of happiness, and so like you get stuck in this pattern where, like the fuckboys, they tend to be more successful, and it turns away the guys who are not the fuckboys, because they just get disenchanted with the whole process in the first place,
Yeah.
and then yeah, it's like a sad state of affairs right now.
It's very interesting. I think what's happening right now is a massive disconnection
Yeah.
from ourselves and from each other. There's a primal fear of connecting,
Yeah.
which is so interesting.
It is
to
interesting.
observe. And it's not even about connecting with each other. It's like we're terrified of knowing ourselves. There's a
Mhm.
deep fear of our shadows. There's a deep fear of our own wounds.
Well, and I,
That's
and I feel like there's. I don't mean to interrupt you. I feel like there's. Am I interrupting
No,
you?
you're not.
So I feel like there's a lot of factors coming into that too.
Yeah.
So atrazine in the water, right? They have shown in studies that actually turns frogs into the opposite sex. It turns male frogs into
Fascinating.
female frogs. You heard of that?
Feminizing, yeah.
I mean,
heard
it
that.
full on
There's a
turn-
lot of things that do that, but yeah, that's
It
one
full
of
on
them.
turns them. Robert Kennedy talked about this on Rogan.
He's a genius.
Yeah, he is.
I love that
He
guy
talked
so
about he
much.
talked about this on Rogan. So you take that for men, and that's just one of
So many things.
hundreds of
Yeah.
factors in our environment that are
Yeah.
lowering our testosterone
Mhm.
and basically trying to make men weak, you know? And then you couple that with what we were talking about before we started recording, the birth control pill,
Mhm.
and that takes women out of their natural state.
Mhm.
So they're no longer going through that 4 week natural cycle.
Mhm.
They're stuck in their perennial summer cycle, right? It's throwing off their hormones.
Mhm.
It's making them go after the fuckboys. Actually, there's people that are doing research now to show that they're like they gravitate towards these emotionally unavailable, screwed up men. Then you throw in the Kardashians, and they all go after emotionally unavailable men. My favorite podcast, Info I Had, talks about that. And it like sets this example. Well, she's got how many millions, hundreds of millions of followers on Instagram. Obviously, she's some type of an influence on society. So all these factors come together to contribute to the dysfunction that we have in the dating world and this quote unquote battle between the sexes still, you know?
It's so much. It's that and more.
Yeah.
You know?
Oh yeah.
This is a
Oh, yeah, we're just-
microcosm of like a larger. So we're ending a cycle of Kali Yuga right now.
Right.
You know, the ages, the
Yep.
age of darkness.
Mhm.
We're closing a chapter on that, thank God.
Yep.
So we're entering, Bronze Age. It's not the Golden Age, but it's Bronze.
I'll
And
take
we
bronze.
Yeah, I'll take Bronze.
Bronze already feels
So
pretty good.
Bronze
honestly.
feels better.
Yeah.
It feels better. So we're closing this chapter, and we're stepping into a different place. And if we look at design and the prophecy of design, and this is why I said the mystical components of design I adore so much, because they offer so much insight into the cycles of nature and
Mhm.
humanity. Ra was told that in 2027 there was going to be an essential shift in humanity. That what we know as the background frequency of the planet of the matrix was going to shift. So we've been in a cross of planning for centuries.
Mhm.
And the cross of planning, which was the incarnation cross of the matrix, was really about tribe and family and institutions and organizations and things of that nature. And as we move into the cross of the sleeping phoenix, which is where we're going, there's a massive emphasis on individualization, understanding ourselves as individual sparks of the
Yeah.
divine. What I'm observing and what you're sharing is that there's a massive cry for that we no longer are meant to be driven by tribal influence
Mhm.
and institutional influence. We're trying to cling to that, but it's not working.
Right.
What we actually need now is a deep, deep dive into who we are as individual expressions of the divine, which is why human design happens to be one of the most profound systems to exist on the planet at this time, because that's precisely what it
What it
offers
is.
you. That's
Yeah.
that's what it gives you, is the understanding of your distinguishment.
Then I guess that's why I started this podcast.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Yes.
So
Do you want to know why you started this podcast?
100%.
More because it's in your chart?
100%. Yeah.
Okay.
Let's do that.
Let's do that.
Mhm.
So I have this chart. I'm looking down at something. So what was more profound to me, really, as I was looking at your chart, is that in your Jupiter placement, you have the gate 13. Now Jupiter, in the way that it's positioned, it's both design and personality, but on personality side, in Gene Keys, we look at that as being your pearl. The pearl is what becomes awakened. Truly, it's like the final expression of your prosperity sequence.
Yeah.
Okay? Gate 13 is the gate of the listener.
It's pretty good. That feels good.
How profound is that? Look at what you're doing.
Yeah.
You are the listener. This is the highest elevation of your success, is actually being a professional listener.
and this has felt so natural, and
Yes.
it's fallen into place so like
How good
almost
is that?
effortlessly.
That's how it is.
And like I just got people coming out of the woodwork
That's
that want to be on the show, that are super interesting. I mean,
Yes.
I have 3-4 weeks scheduled out, and we're talking 3 to 5 people per week.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Because that is your power. That's the gift.
Yeah,
That's like how perfect is that?
that is pretty perfect. And so then something to do with like channels over on the left side with the spleen and
And
the
the
G
throat.
center and the throat.
Yeah.
Yeah, like
Mhm.
that trifecta. Well, then it also connects to the sacral. Has
Yeah.
to do with like, I don't know exactly the specifics. I should
Okay.
learn more about my own design.
Yeah, it's okay.
But it has
We
to do with
can-
like knowing what to say at the right time, and
That's the gate
being
20.
able,
The
and then,
now.
and then being able to
Yeah.
read people, the channel the brainwave.
Yeah, so the 5720 is that. The 57 gives you that intuitive pulse
Yeah.
on people. So this is when you said, when you were speaking to me in Messenger and you were like, I have a feeling that this is going to be a really good conversation. And it's
Yeah.
like, that's what gives you that insight. It's
Yeah.
like, I just have a sense.
Okay.
You know, the 57 gives you that sense about things.
Yeah.
And the
Have-
5027 makes you, this is called the mother channel actually. 57, I look at it as the mother channel. 5027 because it's, 50 is giving you the values, like there's this keen understanding of what's worth passing on
Mhm.
and what's worth progressing on simultaneously.
Mhm.
What do I want to pass on in tradition and what do I
Yeah.
want to change? There's this, that's what the 50 will offer. The 27 on the other side is about, you know, it's a nurturing gate. So it really wants to make sure people are taken care of. It has
Yeah.
a deep need to make sure that people are really taken care of. Hence your passion for things like what's happening in the environment, what's happening with birth control, like all of the interests that you have expressed is very much someone who carries a 27 who's like, this isn't right or people should be treated better.
It's
You
crazy.
know?
Well, and it's so funny because like being in the not self for so long,
Yeah.
I
Ooh, yeah.
oh for so long. If you knew,
Yeah.
I wish we could have had a conversation 10 years ago. I was so like frustrated with the financial system. I got tattoos about the financial system and how we need to change it, you know, but like not worried as much about myself, you know. So then I was also trying to be a fuckboy. Like it sounded fun to just sleep
Yeah.
with all the beautiful women in the world, you know, and so like, and I feel like that's also some past life shit coming through, you know, because he was the poster child for fuckboy.
He was something.
He was something, yeah. And so like all these things culminated in me just being, I mean, miserable. Like in my, I think I maybe shared it in the 30-minute one that I talked about myself, but like it wasn't that many. Like just a few years ago, I was living in my parents' basement in a deep depression. Like so it was 2020. I moved from Iowa back to my parents' house and was living in the basement through 2020 through COVID, and yeah, that was rough. Like I learned the release technique, which is somewhat similar to the emotional freedom technique. It's more about like reprogramming the subconscious just through like speech instead of like incorporating the somatic stuff you're talking about. But it does work. Lester Levinson was the founder of that. And I spoke about that on a previous episode. I think it was the one with Stephen Falconetti. But it's like being in that not self. The reason I'm going into all this is being in that not self. Like it's, if you feel like you're struggling, and that's why I'm so passionate about human design, and I do want to get more into that, is like when you, and it's not something you study and like you know it mentally. You got to experience it in your life.
Yes.
But like I was living in the not self so much, even pretty friggin' recently, until I like around the time that I started this podcast, even where I was like super worried about finances, open root, still
Open ego too.
yeah, an open ego, and then still like feeling people's emotions and like
Not knowing what's yours.
taking them on as mine, and taking offense to like I'll see people's facial expressions when they see me with the double projection and like automatically take it personally. Like I don't know what they're thinking,
Yeah.
you know. And then the open head and ajna at the top is like just thinking all this shit and trying to be certain about stuff that I don't need to be fucking certain
It's
about.
not your job.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like, but all those things, I was literally doing like
All
the
of them.
full-on opposite,
Absolutely.
living the polar
Absolutely.
opposite of my
Absolutely.
design,
Yeah.
and like, I mean, like there was some real dark days.
Yeah.
So the reason I'm sharing all this is because, like, if you're going through stuff and you're going through like depression and you're going through you just constantly feel like you're struggling, and like God is against you, the universe is against you, your family's against you, all of those kinds of things. It's not that they are, it's that when you start to learn about your human design, and it takes a while, it's not something that you just look at your chart, you read through the description, or you have someone teach you, and then it's done, you know, because they can look at it and tell you exactly what's going on.
Yes.
But for you to process that, integrate it, and then actually make it actionable in your life, but that's why I think someone like you is so valuable, because you've navigated a lot of this stuff, you understand it like intimately, and you can give people like tips that like it bypasses that conscious mind in order for them to access like their true natural state.
There's so many layers to that too, and I think the reason I love what I do so much is because the EFT so beautifully facilitates the deconditioning process.
Yeah, I love that.
It's like when people come to me and we have this chart consultation and they're like, what do I do? How do I get out? I'm like, got you.
Yeah, for sure.
Because EFT steps in just so naturally.
With
and
it.
I'm like, let's go. You know, let's look at the shadow components of your chart and let's break it down. And sure enough, they start stripping the layers off, and then they're like, wow, my life has never felt easier, better, opportunities are coming to me, I'm so much more joyful. And I'm like, yeah, because you're being who you are, for real.
Well, in the human design, they talk about it takes 7 years.
Yes, traditionally, yeah, that's
But I think
without
that,
doing
like,
anything. Just
right.
Yeah.
But I think you can speed up the
Absolutely
process
you
with
can.
things like
yeah,
this.
with somatic work like that, you absolutely can. But that's 7 years is if you're just working in the experiment. And that's why human design is called an experiment.
Right.
Because you're experimenting with it, right?
Like,
it's an exposure to something, and then you're working through it, and then you're working through it, and there's layers. You know, you start waking up in layers.
just like practicing meditation.
Absolutely, yeah. It's very much an experiment, and actually what elevated my experience in the last couple of years was radically adhering to my design. I said to myself, I'm going to do nothing unless my strategy is being met, my authority is being met. I will not move. I will not do anything unless those things are happening. I said, this is it. Like, I'm putting a stake in the ground, and I am not moving unless. And as soon as I surrendered to that, and I handled the anxiety that came with that, because as a projector, you know, invitations don't always just come flying at you. There's a lot of waiting that happens, and a lot of mastering. That waiting is a mastering period. I didn't realize that before, but throughout the experiment I did. The more I would pour into my mastery, the more the invitations would come.
Yeah.
The more I surrendered to that. And as soon as I did that, my life just was like, invitation. It was like everybody wanted my time, and I was like, obviously.
Well, and it definitely helps that you have all the experience in the background that you have. So, one question I have for you then, and this applies to projectors, is like, so if you're a projector and you're waiting for the invitation, is it good to like kind of find things to do on your own?
Yes.
Because like you don't need an invitation to go do your own laundry.
No. So one of the biggest misconceptions about strategy and authority I find is that, you know, generators feel like they have to respond to like everything, like laundry. And projectors feel like they have to wait to be invited to do laundry, you know. And so for business and practical, because I'm also a business coach, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs. I coach entrepreneurs on this. I have a whole course on this for entrepreneurs. So this is like a big focus of mine. When it comes to marketing, for example, putting your stuff out on social media, etc., if you were a projector, the point of the waiting period is for you to master something that's yours, because projectors have a unique skill set that they're really good at. There's something for them that they are uniquely gifted at. Working on that, mastering that, and putting out into the world what naturally comes to you as being important to share. When you're exposing that, you give other people the opportunity to see you, to recognize you, and say, I would like to work with you. That's how my business works.
Sure.
That's it. That's what it runs on, and it's been wildly successful because I've understood mastering and waiting for the recognition.
Totally.
Otherwise, we're pouring ourselves into some place that we are not recognized, and so our wisdom doesn't get seen. We feel bitter. It's really a horrible experience.
So then, like as a manifesting generator, I can delve into a bunch of different stuff.
Oh yeah.
So
lots of interest.
The name
lots
Master of Zilch is good. Like Jack of all trades, Master of Zilch.
That's pretty funny.
Okay.
That's well done.
Yeah.
Well played.
All this, I swear to God, no, I'm serious.
That's
like
design.
all this just fell into place. So I did not do that like with the intention of like, oh, I'm a manifesting generator, Master of Zilch. Same thing with the backwards S. For Superman, it makes a Z. I've explained that multiple times. I'll explain it again. Because sometimes this is the first time somebody listens to it.
Of course.
So, and I don't want this to be all about me. I'm just explaining how this all kind of falls into place. And so, the Superman S, when he has it, frontwards as an S,
Mm-hmm.
it means hope on Krypton, and so he's seen as like a messiah figure. And so I'm not a big fan of messiah figures, and it's not that like I don't want someone to help people, but I don't believe that anyone can actually save anyone,
Right.
and
Not a one person.
and Jesus never really said that. Like
Yeah. No
when
one
he was
did.
questioned by
No one
Pontius
did.
Pilate,
Yeah.
they said, "Are you the Messiah?" And he was like, "Well, you say that I am." He never said.
You say I am.
He's never like, "Fucking right, I am." Like, he didn't say that.
Right.
So, but Master of Zilch. So, I flipped the S around because when you're wearing it backwards like that, like if you have a shirt that has the S flipped around, and then you look at yourself in the mirror, it's right way. So then you're seeing yourself as your own hope.
Yeah,
You're your own
that's
Messiah.
powerful.
Yeah.
That's really
But
powerful.
then the Master of Zilch, because Master of Nothing, Master of None was
Yeah.
taken, so I did Zilch because it also means none,
Yeah.
and it happens to be a Z, which is the S backwards.
Yeah. But that's profound because I mean all the wisdoms we know tell us that you know you're wise when you know that you know
You don't know
nothing.
shit.
Yeah. It's perfect.
Yep.
It's great.
Yep.
It's so good.
Yeah, when I finally relaxed into that,
Yeah.
like I needed to know about like 9/11. I needed to know about like the banking system and how screwed up it is and all that stuff. I needed to know, and then I needed to tell everyone. I have projector channels,
Yeah.
so like I'm not waiting for any invitation. Part of it is I was good at talking to people, so I could like break into the conversation and get them to kind of listen to me. But yeah, it was.
There's a reason why you're so inclined to teach about them as well, because one thing that I teach my entrepreneurs in human design is that where you happen to be undefined, you have the most wisdom. We put such an emphasis on the defined centers, which are significant because this is where you have consistency
Yeah.
and you have, output, consistent output, and so that's important. But where we are undefined, we have profound wisdom. And so with your undefined ego, which is the ego of all the centers in the body graph, the ego holds the most merit.
Really?
Yes. 70% of the population has an undefined ego. 30% only has defined. I happen to have a defined ego, so I'm in that smaller category. I only have 3 defined centers though, so I'm like very open in my chart.
Spleen.
G center
Ego
and ego.
and oh.
That's it. My heart, ironically, with what I was born with, my whole heart is defined.
Wow.
Isn't that interesting?
That is interesting.
And my spleen is defined. So you came here obsessed with that because that's a big part of your learning. And the undefined ego didn't come here to prove shit. You want to. You spend most of your life thinking you need to prove
That I
yourself.
need to, yeah.
That's the irony of the undefined ego.
It's crazy.
But you don't need to prove anything at all. At all. You never came here to prove anything.
But see, the Catholic upbringing, what that activated was
Yeah,
guilt.
absolutely.
I felt
I was also
guilty.
raised that way.
Yeah.
So yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I felt guilty growing
just
up.
for being alive.
Well, that definitely. And then, but just like I grew up in a small town,
Yeah.
and I was not a bad-looking kid,
Yeah.
and smart. I was one of the smartest in my class, and I was good at sports. I actually managed to trick myself into not being good at sports. Like I swear to God, I went from 8th grade to freshman year. 8th grade, like the summer, I think it was the last summer of basketball camp for junior high, and like I won like MVP and like, or I co-MVP. I won the one-on-one contest. I think I won the hot shots. I don't know. It was like top 1 or 2 in like all the categories, The next year, I was awful. I was riding the bench because like I felt it was a lot to do with like I just didn't feel worthy of being successful, of being happy.
That's the undefined. That is definitely the undefined ego. That's a massive player. I mean,
Yeah.
undefined ego cannot be understated. If I look at someone's chart and they have an undefined ego, that's the biggest wound they carry.
Yeah, unworthiness.
That's fact.
Yeah.
And it leads to narcissistic relationship. It leads to
Yeah.
people overstepping your boundaries, bad employee relationships, employer relationships.
Yeah.
It leads to
Oh God, I have that.
all kinds of things. Being a doormat, or sometimes people with undefined egos will go in the opposite direction,
Yeah, I
become
didn't do that. I
narcissists.
didn't
You
do
know,
that. Well,
I see
sometimes,
both.
but yeah.
I see both. That's what I'm saying with
Yeah.
the undefined ego.
For
It's
sure.
like,
Yeah. Well, in the unworthiness, biofield tuning talks about like so right here is where I had an ileostomy. This was like
Oh, okay.
the true awakening, where the
Okay.
universe tried to tell me and I wasn't listening.
yeah. Okay.
Trying to listen but didn't know how to. I think.
Yes.
And so I had an ileostomy. You know what that is?
Yes. I
So
do.
I had 60 days with the ileostomy bag,
Yeah.
and and that's right in the spot of unworthiness. Like biofield tuning, like studies like the electromagnetic energy field, and in that spot right there, and then they traced it back. Like I had one session with that, and he traced it back, and he found it way on the edge of the field of that electromagnetic energy field, all the way out on the edge of the 6 feet. And so that happened basically right around birth. So I had the cord wrapped around my neck twice. So it's like I'm not worthy of living, kind of like, you know. And so, and then also never breastfed. And I love my mom. If I'm gonna bring this up, and it's not a slight on my mother.
Of course not.
It was the 80s.
We know, man. We know. We
But
know
I
better
mean,
now.
yeah.
But as children, we don't.
Yeah.
That's the premise of EFT too.
Exactly.
I take people back to what their child self thought.
Yeah.
It's not about what you understand now.
Right.
You can rationalize what your parents did, what they said now.
Totally. Yeah.
But I need you to go back when you were 5, when you were 6.
Because it's in the body.
Of course it is.
Yeah.
And you need to get that. You need to clear that up.
Yeah.
That's essential.
Well, and that's why I feel like I've done that pretty,
Yeah.
like much more recently, like
Yeah.
been really working on that. So, not saying I'm finished, but like,
we never are.
yeah, right.
Deconditioned. As long as you're alive, you're deconditioned.
Yeah, but the unworthiness is like crazy.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's
like
massive.
I had this girlfriend in high school,
Massive.
and like I felt unworthy of her, even though we were, you know, in love. You know,
Mhm.
I felt unworthy of her to the point where like I basically been fairly much single since then until like more. Well, I'm still single now, but like it's been like that unworthiness was so deep rooted. And when they did that biofield tuning, he brought up the fact that like he asked me about like we ended up talking about the breastfeeding, and that I mean she never even attempted it.
Yeah.
So he's like, think about that. Your own mother, which she didn't do it intentionally,
Right.
but you were turned down by the very first woman in your life.
Energetically.
Yeah. I mean,
Prime source of life,
and
yeah.
so yeah, it's fucked up. And it happened. You know, it affects different people differently. Because
Absolutely.
both my brothers are happily married. They got kids. You know, and so,
I mean, I can say, you know, I also was not breastfed for other reasons. My mom was super depressed based on everything that happened to me, so
Yeah.
she couldn't produce, and that affects your ability to breastfeed. And it happened to me with my son. I had to battle to breastfeed him. It was a struggle to breastfeed him, but I worked at it. I mean, it took 2 months. I was not giving up,
Yeah.
whatever it took, because I understood the implications of that.
Totally.
But my mom at the time didn't have a lot of support or help, so I wasn't either. But I was born with a defined ego, and so for me, it wasn't going to hit the same way. It's
Yeah.
not that you can't have conditioning where you're defined. It's harder to get conditioning
Sure,
where you're defined.
because
You know what I'm saying?
you're generating your
Yeah.
own energy.
So I might have had questions of my value more from like an ajna, because I'm undefined ajna, more of like doubting from there.
Yeah.
But I never really struggled with that because
Yeah.
I have a defined ego. So that wasn't really a part of my journey. I had a very strong sense of self, my defined G center. Like if I wanted something, I could have it, I could do it, I could, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like I had a steady sense of that.
Yeah.
It's fascinating to, you know, look at different charts, maybe your brother's charts, and see who's defined, you know, versus you undefined,
My
and the
brother-
difference, you know?
Yeah, my middle brother's a 4/6 manifester, and like.
Oh, manifester.
Yeah,
That's
manifester.
big energy.
Oh, yeah,
That's big energy.
Oh yeah, it's crazy because like I
That's-
would be beating him at stuff because I was older, you know, at video
Yeah.
games or whatever. And then my open emotional center, like it was what I call it is misguided empathy, or you know, false empathy, because you're feeling sorry for someone. So then you like, I used to like lose at stuff so he wouldn't feel so
he wouldn't
bad.
feel so bad.
And then it's actually doing both of us a
Yeah,
disservice
absolutely.
because he's not getting stronger and
Absolutely.
learning how to, you know, overcome
Absolutely.
challenges.
Yeah.
And then I think he resented me not anymore, but he did resent me for a while because of that. But I thought I was doing the right thing.
Of course.
And I swear to God, part of it is the false teachings of Jesus. When I'm going to share this because all this is relevant.
Yeah.
So when I was 5 years old, I was on I think I might have mentioned it in the 30-minute one where I was just talking about myself. But when I was 5 years old, I was standing there and on the playground, and my mom wasn't there. Like her friend was watching me, and I don't know, she was doing something, whatever. And so her friend was watching me. We were on the playground, and this kid that was a year older than me, that was in kindergarten, and I was still in my last year of preschool, and he like came up and started kicking me in the shins, you know, and like I didn't move, like I just stood there and let him keep kicking me in the shin instead of running away or kicking him back, you know. And so my mom's friend, who actually became my confirmation sponsor in
Okay.
Catholicism, amazing woman. But she told my mom about it afterwards because she came over and pulled me away, and she told my mom about it. And my mom was like, "Why didn't you fight back? Like, what's the deal?" And I said, "Jesus taught us to turn the other cheek." Well, that's a misinterpretation
You're
of
100%
Jesus'
a
teaching.
misinterpretation of
Yeah.
his teachings. Yeah.
And that was probably taught by a priest growing up that I
Yeah.
misinterpreted because I was pretty smart
Yeah.
at a young age.
Mhm.
So I'm taking on information that I don't even know how to understand.
Correct.
And, you know, listening to sermons that I shouldn't have been fucking listening to.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah, should have been in a
Yeah.
playing with other kids.
That's a big one. That's a big misinterpretation of what that really meant of turning the other cheek. That's such a deep teaching, but it's, you know, he simultaneously was flipping tables and taking people on
Exactly.
tables, you know. So we have to understand righteous anger. We have to understand what that means to be able to righteously defend things from
Innocence.
a solid place. Yeah.
Yeah.
Versus, you know, the perpetual meekness that we're taught in, you know, which is not exactly it.
No,
That
he
wasn't
was
exactly the
definitely
point.
not a meek guy,
Correct.
I
He
guarantee.
wasn't. Neither was Yogananda. Yogananda had a massive presence, a
Yeah.
massive energy. Everybody said his will was his voice, you know,
Yeah.
and you can feel it when you listen to him. He
Oh,
was
yeah.
big. He was a little guy, but he was huge, and he was anything but like really meek. You
Yeah.
know, he was kind and he was compassionate, and this is such a huge conversation because I sometimes get people to come to me, and I just shared this in my stories, like, what about being nice? Like, 'cause sometimes I say things and it's really, you
Yeah.
know, arrowhead.
Yeah.
And I said, I don't want to be nice. I want to be truly loving. I want to be so loving to you that I can tell you the truth.
Yeah.
Because that's a big thing about the undefined emotional center is when you're in the not self, you want to avoid truth.
Uh-huh.
Because sometimes you can start a wave for somebody who's defined, and then you have to deal with the outcome of that.
Ah.
You have to deal with the outcome of their emotional wave if they're
Okay.
defined. Because we're 50-50. Some of us are 50% undefined, 50% defined. So the shadow side of the undefined emotional center is we don't want to tell the truth or deal with the confrontation because then we have to deal with the wave that the
Yeah.
defined person is going to bring in our direction.
Mm.
We don't want to do that.
I
So
didn't-
what's interesting about that is my work now is primarily in the emotional center with EFT. Like I work so much, but why? I'm undefined there, but that's where I'm the most wise. So now with my work there, like really, and I teach human design with my undefined head and undefined ajna,
Yeah.
right? So
Okay.
I'm like teaching this esoteric sort of system, and I'm facilitating emotional transformation. All the work that I do is from my undefined centers. I deliver it from my definition though, and that's the difference. I deliver
I like that.
from heart.
Yeah.
I deliver from consistent access to my intuition. I
Sweet.
deliver from those places because I have that.
Yeah.
You know.
You and I can have 100 conversations.
So many layers.
Yeah. On just so many different topics. Like
Yes.
we jumped around, but I like that.
Yeah.
I don't like to have a conversation
Yeah.
where we're trying to stay rigid and,
Yeah.
and structured, and we got to stay on this subject. For one thing, it's unnatural,
Yeah.
but also I think like when you weave in different topics, it helps people understand it better.
Context.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And applicability. Yeah.
One thing I did want to touch on, you don't have much time left.
I can do a couple more minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I did want to touch on this before we go, and we didn't talk as much about human design as I kind of thought we would,
Mhm.
but we can come back to that on a
Okay.
future episode.
Okay.
Is there anything that you want to talk about before we go?
I realized I didn't answer your questions, and I just realized that you're like, where can they find you? How did you get here? And
That's
I was like,
okay.
I sort of did.
Well, you
I
did.
went
How
around.
did
Did
you
I?
get here?
Did I answer
How did
that?
you get here? Yeah, you.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely
Okay.
talked somewhat about
Okay.
your journey. I know everybody and it's not like, because it's vulnerability, you know. And I'm not
Yeah.
saying you're
Yeah.
not. I'm not saying you're afraid to be vulnerable,
No,
but
no.
like to share your journey. A lot of
Yeah.
times people kind of, almost subconsciously, they end up talking about other stuff, you
Yeah.
know. And so, whatever you want to talk about, we got a few minutes left. Whatever you would like to.
No, I mean, I think what I really want people to understand about design and how it relates to everything we've talked about is that we are entering an age where the demand on your spirit is to truly understand who you are as an individual, to truly understand your guide, your dharma. You
Yeah.
know, so my brands, I'm currently rebranding. So my website is ShaktiRios.com. It's just my name. But I've started a whole other facet of my work called the Dharma Directive. And the reason that's so important for me is because when we understand our Dharma, the rules and guidelines for our unique existence on the planet as this individual expression of spirit, and we align all of our decisions by way of those guidelines, life becomes so exciting.
Yeah.
It's an adventure. It becomes an adventure.
I'm living it right now.
And you're flowing, you
Yeah.
know? And what design does is it removes that resistance where it feels like you're just going
Banging your head,
upstream,
yeah.
you know? And you finally orient your kayak with the stream, and you're like, oh shit.
Abraham Hicks talks about that.
Yes.
And so Dharma, when we talk about Dharma, it's like what you're here to do.
Yeah, that's a short understanding of it. The broader understanding in yoga is like a set of principles and guidelines by which your life is organized. And everybody has different dharma. That's the thing. We all have unique versions of that.
And you have more choice in the first 6 profiles of the hexagram, right? 1 3 1 4, 2 4 2 5, 3 5 3 6. What I was told is because they're all the right angle paths, that you have a little more choice. You have a little more wiggle room.
It's
and
more
then the left angle
personal.
paths. Okay.
There's personal and transpersonal incarnation process.
Okay.
Yeah. So the one that's really fixed is 4 1s. If you have a 4-1, you're like going in this direction whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
that is your railroad track. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's it. 4 1s, you're there. The most helpful thing for people to understand is that there's transpersonal incarnation cross and personal incarnation crosses. So when they're personal, really more about your journey and your exploration within the journey.
Okay.
When it's transpersonal, when you have 4 6s, these double transpersonal numbers, it's very much about your relationship to the outside,
What's
the
mine?
other. You're a 5-2, so you're actually both. You're like in between. You have, as a 5, your conscious profile line is transpersonal. So it's really going to be focused on leadership, and it's really going to be focused on how you can serve the other.
Yeah.
But your unconscious, your design is 2. So it's very inward.
Yeah.
There's a deep desire for the body. Your body needs inward recluse time.
Yeah.
Your design needs that.
Just love people and being out.
Yeah, but don't forget that.
I know.
Because as you go inward and you really manage the genius, because the 2 is a genius, a natural genius at what they do, as you really learn to hone that, not through study, but through beingness.
Yeah,
That's the difference between the 1 and the 2, right? I'm the 1. I'm the researcher. I have studied everything you probably want to know about in depth.
And I felt guilty in the past for not reading books. I'll buy books and then I end up not reading them.
Yeah.
And I felt guilty because I'm like,
interesting.
and then when I talk about stuff, people are like, well, how do you know this? And I'm like, well, I mean,
I'm a 2-line.
Well, I could have said that if I'd have known. But part of it was like, I'll just watch a documentary and it kind of like intuitively comes to me.
Absolutely.
And so then I can go and explain it to people. And they're like, oh, what makes you a freaking expert? I do want to bring this up.
Yeah,
so
that's fine.
on Facebook, I remember this was years ago. This kid who got like a 34 on the ACT, super duper smart, went to college with him. He's from a nearby town. And I remember I was talking about different stuff, and I know, we could probably go back and look now, and it's more accepted truths now, because it tends to be how it goes, But I can't specifically think of what we were talking about exactly. It might have been Glass-Steagall and the banking system, and like how like corrupt it is, and how we can move into a better future with a better system. And I remember that kid, he was like super smart, but like Dunning-Kruger syndrome, I believe is what it's called, and it's a syndrome. They actually term this, and it's to put people down that don't, like, if you don't have qualifications and certifications in order to be able to speak on a subject, then you have Dunning-Kruger syndrome, and you think that you're an expert on something that you don't know shit about. And I swear to God, I bet we could look, there's so many things I want to study about in human design, but I bet we could look at the Dunning-Kruger syndrome and look at a lot of the people that are accusing it, tend to have maybe 1s.
1 line, for sure.
And then a lot of people that are accused of it tend to have 2 lines.
Yeah, that would make sense. I mean, as a 1-3 in my life, and I've renamed the profile lines for business owners. So, for example, for you, I call you the activator natural, right? Because that's who you are. You activate people with your 5 line. You're a natural. The things you do with your 2 line, right? In my case, I'm like the scholar scientist. So I study everything to the bitter bottom of it, the depths of it, and then I make perpetual mistakes as a 3 line until I learn what works.
And it seems like you've made the right mistakes.
Yes, I have. And you know what? I have very few regrets. There's some, the only regrets I carry are the ones where I wounded another person out of my own unconsciousness, because they didn't deserve that. Those are my regrets. That I was so unconscious I couldn't see the harm I was inducing in that moment. But other than that, it's like every mistake I've made has been a blessing, a massive, massive learning. I couldn't carry the wisdom I have now or be the level of transformative teacher that I am now if it weren't for my martyr, my
Totally.
3 line that just perpetually martyred
Sounds
itself
just-
over and over again.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, for sure.
It's been
And
necessary.
so, one last thing.
Yeah.
Okay. So, when we're talking about, because my friend, and I'm going to have her on too, she talks about how all this dysfunctional stuff that's happening in relationships and like between men and women and everything, she's like, maybe it's never supposed to get better. Maybe we're moving into this time where like we're supposed to focus on ourselves and that like this is just the new norm. And I was like, no, I'm not buying that. Sorry. I think it was dysfunctional because we were codependent on each other
Yeah.
in the tribal stuff.
Yes, we
And
were.
so now as we move, we're in this transition
Yes.
period where we're learning,
frequencies
we're almost in
changing.
like the 3-line phase
Yeah.
where we're experimenting, figuring out what works, and then as we learn more about ourselves and become more comfortable with ourselves, then we're going to be a better partner to someone, and we're not codependent on them, and it's a healthier, stronger relationship. We're going to be better parents. We're going to raise better kids. All that.
So I will tell you from what Ra was told, family as we understand family will be quite different. And fertility would drop. And he said that. We would be having less children. That would be the future. The other thing he said was that we would be changing as a species. So we went from being 7-centered beings to 9. We are a transient species right now. We're actually in transition to 12-centered being. And so we would basically, by 2027, there would be a whole new species of human coming to the planet that would operate quite differently than what we know now. That's the prediction.
So my question is, because the Mayans predicted in 2020 or 2012 that shit was just gonna just instant transition.
Yeah.
Or the idea that we're moving out of the age of Pisces and into the age of Aquarius.
Yeah.
So when that happened on the equinox, it should have been like, oh my God, boom,
No, it
we're
doesn't
in
work that way. It doesn't work that way.
and I feel like
It's
this
a
human
phase.
design is the same thing.
It's a phase.
There's so many people that I talk to in human
Yeah.
design, and they're like, just wait till 2027, just wait till 2027.
No, it's
I think
not like
that's
it starts.
That's the calendar mark
Right.
that's saying, okay, here
It's
we
an
can kind of
energetic
look at it.
phasing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a phasing. All
Yeah.
of these are phasing. You know, it takes years. You
Yeah.
know, you enter the age and then you have the experience. It's not just like.
But how shitty would it be if we like were moving out of the time where like we were in relationships but didn't know how to navigate them,
Yeah.
and then we figure out how to navigate them and we
Yeah.
don't want them anymore?
I don't think that we're not going to want them. I think the way that we want them is going to be different. That's what I think is happening. One of the things that happens in design now is people like sacral beings, like yourself, are attracted to non-sacral beings, and there's this sort of like filling gaps
Yeah.
is what ends up happening.
Right.
One thing that we will likely see as we change and become more individualized is us pairing up with our same type, actually, which is something else that Ra talked about, and learning how to live adjacent lives, and learning how to support each other without needing each
Right,
other the way that
exactly.
we've needed each other. So this is what I think is likely more going to happen, is that we're going to start pairing together based on different needs,
Right.
based on the understanding of who we are as individuals and what we want on a value comparison basis, not like I want children, I want, all of
Yeah.
the splenic, because this is the thing, is we're moving from a splenic-led population, which was very much about survival and instincts,
Right.
into an emotional, awareness center-based population. So what does the emotional center give us? It gives us creativity, it gives us emotional intelligence. That's why we are moving into a place of placing so much value on emotional well-being as a
Right.
collective.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
It's by design. It's the program is shifting. It's shifting from being splenic to being emotional. That's why we're seeing people leaving jobs in mass, because
Yeah.
their jobs, who cares about the benefits? You don't fucking care about me emotionally. You know,
right.
that's what's happening.
Yeah. And
So that's by
and then
design.
you see like the baby boomer generation looking at or older looking at millennials like
Yeah.
they don't want to fucking work.
Exactly.
Well, no, I don't want to work like a slave.
Exactly. And that's the thing. It's because background frequency has changed. All these things that were holding us, chaining us because
Yeah.
of survival from a splenic perspective are mattering less.
Yeah.
And now, what do you give me for my emotional well-being? It's
Well-
mattering more.
And I think that part of it is like you look at the fact that like technology has allowed us to evolve to the point where we have enough technology now to
Yeah.
like everyone can have
Their own thing.
yeah, and so
100%.
we don't and infinite
And
su-
education on their own terms.
yeah, and the idea
Yeah.
of infinite supply,
Yeah.
that nature is constantly creating more, that there's not going to be a lack.
Absolutely.
And so when you have all those survival needs taken care of, it allows you to transition to this point where like, let's take care of each other's
Hierarchy of
emotions.
needs.
Yeah.
Maslow predicted it. I
Yeah.
mean, way before any,
Yeah.
before design came along, Maslow
Right.
was like, when this is met, we can self-actualize. Absolutely.
Maybe he was-
design is saying that.
Maybe he was a 2-line and
Maybe.
he intuited it.
Maybe. Or a very splenic being. you know, who could just perceive, you know, like, oh shit, this is probably what's coming down the pipe. Like, this is how it'll work.
Yeah.
We are transitioning from being bottom of the pyramid of needs to the top.
Yeah.
And that transition is weird because if you're self-actualized and I'm self-actualized and we come into a relationship, what are we actually needing from each other?
Presence.
Exactly. And how does that change the game?
Makes things easier.
It does when you're aware.
Right.
But in the transition, it gets weird.
Yeah.
Because now you're dealing with a population of some of us are aware, some of us are not. We're trying to date, and we're coming from different background frequencies altogether. There's a massive miscommunication happening.
Okay, and I definitely wanted to touch on this. So I'm sorry if you got to go. So like, the one thing that I've noticed, in fact, I was having a conversation with a friend last night, and he was sharing very similar struggle to what I've gone through.
Mm-hmm.
This is a good-looking guy.
Yeah.
He's like definitely. I mean, he's got more money than I do. I'm pretty low on the money thing, but it's moving in the right direction. But like, and it's not all about money, but it somewhat is as a man.
It was with his money background.
Well,
it was
it was,
especially.
but you have to have some money.
You do.
You know, in order to buy a
But
house.
all the metrics you've described, good looking,
Yeah.
money, that's very much what we needed. We needed that as a splenic population for genetics. We needed to understand how we're passing on genetics in a certain way.
Right.
We need to be able to provide for the tribe. Like, all of this is it's important still, but it was very important.
It was central. Well, so what I was going to say though also is that he is in the spiritual community, right? And he seems like a very good person.
Mm-hmm.
He practices TM like me. I won't give him too much away, but he's gone. Last night he was expressing some of the same struggles I've had in the dating world, and the fact that and I swear to God, so this is what I was going to say. There's several thoughts that come to mind. So first off, we still have primal drive, right,
Yes,
as a man,
of course.
and we want the more attractive women.
Okay.
That's just how
Genetics.
we're wired. I mean,
Yeah.
seriously,
Yeah.
they've done studies for over a century.
For what you consider attractive, too.
Yeah.
Because everybody,
Well,
that's the other thing.
that's true.
Everybody has their attractive, and there's a drive, there's a reason for why.
But we know that
Why?
Brad Pitt, is, like on a general scale, is more attractive than Jack Black.
I don't know.
Okay, but if we took a survey, it's not going to be like
Maybe.
80% of the population is going to be like, yeah, Jack Black's better looking.
I'm kidding, because I know what you mean. But
Okay.
yeah.
It
I have a
has to
different
do with the
perspective on
Fibonacci
it.
spiral.
Yeah.
And
Symmetry.
Right.
Yeah, we're looking at symmetry
Right.
and, angles.
And then
stuff,
there's
yeah.
different
Absolutely.
dimensions and all that.
Absolutely, yeah.
So what I was going to say was, like, from a primal standpoint, we as men are like geared to go after the more attractive women, right? But like, they tend to sometimes be not as open to like this self-development stuff. And I used to be like resentful about that. I've put myself into their shoes, activated more of my 13 genes key, the empathy and the listener, and try to step into their shoes and think, okay, I struggled or I fought like self-development for so long and like tried to do it my way and all that stuff. And my survival needs were not being met. And I was a man. Think about if you're an attractive young woman, you're in your late teens, and all of a sudden, the whole world wants to have sex. Well, half the world wants to have, over half the world wants to have sex with you because a lot of women are fluid now. And so, like, you get all of your primal survival instincts met. Like, they're just met. You can manipulate men if you want to, or you can be kind, and men will want to give you whatever you want. You know what I'm saying? So the reason I'm bringing all this up is he's expressing this like struggle in the dating world, right? Another thing I was going to layer on top of that is men, like, the way I see it is, and this is going to sound maybe a little weird, but whatever. As a woman, you're carrying the child, right? So like, if you aren't quite on the same path yet, then it's going to be like foreign to you to see a guy who's started down that path. I mean, his actual DNA has somewhat changed. You know what I mean? Like going through all this shit and processing all this stuff, right? So he's almost like not another species, but he's different. And so when you think about it from a basic primal instinctual level, she's thinking, I don't want that alien seed inside me.
Yes.
And I want this familiar thing, even if it's toxic,
Harmful.
even if it's
Absolutely.
dysfunctional.
That's the nature of
I
that.
would rather have that.
100%.
And so it like, but from an intellectual, like, logical standpoint as a man, that's screwing with our fucking head.
Yeah.
Right? Because you're primarily driven and attracted to these women. They want nothing to do with you, but on a deeper level, you know that you can provide for them more emotionally,
Yeah.
and like it would just be probably a more harmonious relationship.
So my question to you and to your friend would be,
I'm over it now, but
Yeah.
but not pretty much. I mean,
it would
maybe
be the
not.
understanding that you are more than just a primal being. For one.
Right.
You're a lot more than
But
that.
if you're physically attracted to someone, you can't make yourself physically attracted to people that you're not physically attracted to.
That's true. Also, though, what controls your body? Is it your body?
Well, should be. Your mom.
Yes.
Yeah.
So then the question would be, why do I keep attracting women who are unavailable to me?
Right.
Why?
Well, because I wasn't breastfed. I don't know. But
Why does that feel attractive? Because attraction, from a human design standpoint, is aura mechanics.
right.
It's not physical. You think it's physical
Yeah.
because that's what you see. It's aura mechanics. Chemistry is aura mechanics. So why do I keep being pulled in by this individual with this energy signature? Why?
Yeah.
Because the belief that there aren't beautiful women who are open is a lie.
Who are
like
open
who are
to-
consciously on the similar frequency, they're everywhere. I run into them all of the time.
I have run into them as well, but this is another thing. Men, like, especially, like, they say something about, like, when you first, like, are intimate with a woman,
Mhm.
then it kind of puts an imprint on you.
Mm.
And that's why, like, men tend to be attracted to younger
Templates.
women than older women.
That's
And
interesting.
so, like, I feel like in this society that we're in right now, where it's like everybody stays single into their late 30s,
Mhm.
that, like, so women are figuring stuff out, but
Mhm.
they're figuring out into their late 30s, right?
Mhm.
And so then we kind of have a drive to, especially if you're looking to have kids,
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
Like if I'm in my late 30s and I meet a woman who's my age or older,
Mhm.
our time window, she's her clock is ticking.
Yep.
And this is nothing against older women.
Mhm.
I have nothing against them, but like from a man standpoint, if I can find a 25-year-old who's on the path,
Mhm.
and she's going to have some struggles and
Mhm.
some tumultuous stuff going
Mhm.
on still, but I would rather go.
Yeah.
I would rather go down that path with her, and if she's open and already on the path, then she's already like, working on herself, and so then like, I'm not gonna like try to coach her and be her like life coach,
Mhm.
but like, I can just be that presence, and so versus like, if she struggled for a long time and she's in her late 30s, either she has kids and is
Mhm.
divorced, and
Mhm.
then you know what I'm saying. So like, there's a lot of factors that go into all this that like, it makes it difficult for a guy who's on this path. And what I would say, last thing,
Yeah.
women who are on this path,
Mhm.
I sometimes think that they're almost like got a savior complex. And so then they tend to date men outside of the spiritual community because they're looking to
That's
try
a
to
wounded ego thing.
right. But I'm just saying, I've
Yeah.
witnessed it.
Yeah.
I mean, I was at,
That's a definitely
and this is
a
nothing
wounded
against people
feminine.
around here, like at all.
Mhm.
But I noticed a lot of women in the spiritual community.
Mhm.
They go to this. There's a party that like where there's alcohol served, but it's still kind of a spiritual vibe. And I see tons of women who are on the spiritual path. I see them all these other spiritual events, but then this one that has booze, they bring their normie boyfriend. And nothing against people who aren't on this path. I'm not saying that, but I'm just saying. So then, and I made the joke, and I'm just joking, okay? I really am. But I made the joke that like those guys who don't come to any of that stuff,
Yeah.
if she brings him, he has to put on a shirt that says, "I'm here for the beer and pussy."
Yeah, well, would
As
be
a
too
joke,
far
as-
off.
as a
Would
joke.
be too far off,
Yeah, yeah,
maybe.
yeah.
I would say if you go back to the very basic principles of quantum, and you understand that you are everything and everything is you,
Right.
and you are in direct dialogue with the quantum, and you have a desire, then in order for you to have the desire, you have to become a match for your desire.
Right. And that's where, like, for me personally, understanding my design a little bit better, my motivation is innocence. Like, there's so many things that scream, and so the analogy that I've made recently And this is what I was naturally doing when I was younger,
Yes.
is like a Spider-Man approach.
Yes.
Spider-Man is like the friendly neighborhood guy.
Yes.
He's not like the super suave,
There's
like
no
I'm gonna
striving.
sweet talk
There's
women.
no striving.
Yeah, he's sweet.
We're not striving.
But he's not like a sweet talker,
innocence.
manipulator, conniving dude.
Yes.
And so like I tried to be that for so fucking long
Undefined
from my
ego.
not self.
Of
Yep.
course. Yeah.
And now that I've like relaxed into this, and nothing necessarily has really changed in my dating life,
Yet.
but I have
Yet.
changed, and I don't have this angst anymore.
Yeah.
And
And that's
I
why
would
you're
love.
now becoming a match. Of course something has changed. You did. You're half of that partnership.
Right, I'm saying like it hasn't manifested in
Yeah.
anything.
But it has changed.
Oh,
and
yeah,
that's
yeah,
significant for you to recognize. Something has absolutely changed.
Oh.
Because I am different.
Oh my god.
And I am the source point of this intention.
Yep.
So if I have changed and I am the source point of this intention, by definition and understanding physics, the result has to be different when it shows up into the field.
And that's the thing is like you're explaining this out, but like I like it just in the last few weeks we're talking. This transition has happened,
Yeah.
and so like now I like intuitively have this faith, like 100% faith that this is all going to work out. That there are
Yes.
women out there that I am
Absolutely
looking
there
for
are.
that are
Absolutely.
you know
You're
what I
looking
mean?
for you. Absolutely.
And
yes.
yeah, and it's harder to see, and I'd love to talk to that guy sometime and talk to him more about this,
Yeah.
because it's harder to see because from a logical standpoint, your mind tells you all kinds of lies,
Absolutely.
and also just from a logical standpoint in another sense, I believe that there are more and more women who have worked through a lot of their shit, and because I've met a lot of women just in the spiritual community that said like I'm not dating right now. You know, I would ask them out to coffee or whatever, and they're like, I'm not dating, like, I'm just not doing it. And at a men's group pretty recently, we were talking about the fact that the women in our spiritual community, they're just like not open to like
Taking
companionship,
away.
partnership.
Ah,
Yeah,
They need it though. Because
Right.
if they're doing the savior thing, that's a problem.
right.
So they're becoming aware of that.
And I
So
think,
what's happening? You know?
yeah, and I think that
Aware of-
we men are starting to step into like a healthier masculine,
Yes.
and we're becoming more ready for
Yes.
that
for each
higher
other.
level.
We're doing the work.
Yeah.
It's just this is your transition period, man.
Yeah, I want to start doing like events where we're like kind of helping us all to kind of understand like
Mhm.
how we can navigate. And I promise this is the last thing. So one thing that I've noticed is like this apprehension to engage in the dating world
Yes.
because of the past problems and trauma that we have gone through, especially women.
Mhm.
Men can kind of get over it quicker and just be ready to move on.
Mhm.
But my suggestion would be, don't be afraid to fail.
Mhm. It's
And-
very
and-
three-line
and-
suggestion.
Yeah, but I mean, like, because learning together, and especially if you're doing the work now,
Yeah.
you're not going to have to. It's
Yeah.
not going to be the same as when that kid broke up with you in sophomore year of high school, and it just ruined you for a
Mhm.
long time. You're more established in yourself,
Mhm.
and like I'm not saying we got to just go out and start getting married
Mhm.
and making babies, but I'm saying like I would like to see a little more. Like there's a lot of independent stuff going on,
Yes.
and I think that we would benefit from more coming together.
I think these conversations are really worth having. These vulnerable, open conversations
Yeah.
are absolutely, I think that would be a massive benefit to all of us to break down some walls and barriers that we have. I will always go back to, because the conversation you're having about relationships is not different than money, it's not different than business, it's
Yeah.
not different than anything. You are the source point
Right.
of your life. You carry karma, you have energetic attachments, you are the center of your universe.
Right.
To the degree that you are centered in your being is to the degree that the outward expression
Right.
of your life is a match for who you are. That's true of everything.
Right.
Everything.
But I'm just saying we don't have to be fully enlightened,
Oh, we can
totally
do we can do
centered
that
beings.
together,
Right.
but we have to be focusing on our
Ourselves.
healing.
Right.
On that us being the center of our universe when we are in conversation.
Yeah.
In this conversation, you are the center of your universe and I am the center of mine.
Right.
And we come together and we have a beautiful conversation because we are centered in the being of who we are.
Right.
And that can happen in a community level. But it can't happen if we're looking to fill the needs of the other, read their minds, or be something for the other, or
Totally
all
agree.
these things that we've done that have been truly unhealthy.
Yep.
So when we're having a community discussion from the I am here and you are there, and
Yeah.
together we are having this, that's beautiful, and that's, I think, very needed.
And it's communication.
Yeah, absolutely.
When we're talking about moving
Healthy
out of the spleen and into the emotional
communication.
that's
Yes,
emotional
absolutely.
communication, and
Yeah.
that's where I think we can
Yeah.
start to come
That
together
would be
more.
beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be very valuable.
Sweet.
We've talked about everything.
Pretty much. I think we solved all the world's
We
problems
did
today.
past lives, human design,
We solved all the world's,
relationships.
we solved all the world's problems. We're
We
done.
did. They should just hire us. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I can't wait to have you on again.
Thank you.
Let's schedule it right now.
This was really joyful.
Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, I'm so thankful.
Yeah. Namaste.
I can't wait to, namaste. Can't wait to do this again.
Yes.
So I hope you guys got something out of it. Any questions you have, there's a Q&A in the Spotify, or you can comment in the YouTube channel, because it's going to go up on YouTube as well. I don't know about Apple Music. I don't have Apple Music, but I guess I should get a subscription so I can mess with that too. But yeah, so thank you for listening.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
she's a pretty amazing lady. So yeah, let's. What I've been closing out with is, you are your own Messiah.
Yes.
I believe in you, and you can do it.
Yes.
Thank you guys for listening.
Namaste.